Uh, I'm real excited to introduce today's speaker. Almost 2 years ago, I got out of treatment and was all, they say like find someone that has what you want and ask them to be your sponsor. I didn't really do that. I was a lot more desperate and was just like, somebody help me. Um, but now I know that I'd like to have what she has. She has seen me through some of the hardest times of my life, but has shown me immense grace and compassion and a whole lot of patience. And hasn't just taught me how to be sober. She's shown me great humility and how to show up and how to let go, how to set boundaries and keep them, which is harder. But I'll just keep it brief so you can hear more from her and hopefully learn as much as I have. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Elena and I'm an alcoholic. Um, my sobriety date is October 21st, 2007. I have a home group, which is the Sunrise Group, which I share with many of you. And I have a sponsor. She has a sponsor, and I have sponsees and a service position. And I will start off just telling you a little about myself. I'm going to talk a lot about before drinking, just because, just show how far I've come. That's been the thing that has blown me away in AA is that, I've gotten me back. Um, my father was an immigrant and my mother's child of immigrants. And I started out real happy, and I was like a leader of my little brother and sister. And when I was 3.5, they left me and the younger ones, they abandoned us for 4 months. And the bottom dropped out of my life, like I became not a happy child. I became just extremely anxious, extremely depressed. I spent that, to the best of my memory, I spent the entire time just waiting for them, hoping they would come back. And then I gave, waiting for the mailman, the telephone to ring, and none of that ever happened. And eventually I just assumed they died. I thought they went up the vacuum cleaner hose and went up into heaven with my older sisters. I just They did come home, and so I was able to get my footing a little bit, but I wasn't the same child. And I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And that was because that's just the way my parents were brought up. And I know that I hated them their entire life, and I was not able to make amends until after they had passed. And that was um about 18 years ago. I was able to make amends. But so I now know that there was not a malicious bone in them. They just they didn't know better. They really didn't, and it happened to my father, and they just thought this was normal. But I wasn't allowed to talk about it, and that was part made it even worse. And then when I was 7, my sister got cancer, and the same coping mechanism of my parents was you don't talk about it and you don't tell the kids. So I didn't find out for another 6 years that she would just disappear. And what that did was, that was really what pushed me under. I stopped having friends, would pretend I was sick so I wouldn't have to go to school. Um, I stayed home all the time, and I tried to kill myself when I was about 8 or 9. Um, and I didn't get help, but back then that just wasn't a thing that am aware of, that children got help at, back in the 60s. So, but I stayed alive, and then I found, you know, around preteens, I found, well, wait a minute, I've got a girl power, I can use my looks to get things. And then I found drinking, and then I found drugs, and it just felt like, I felt like I was back. I felt like, I can have friends. I can actually have a conversation with people. I can uh, have what I always wanted, which was just to be relaxed and feel part of, and I I do think it probably, the drinking and the drugs probably kept me alive through that period of time. But um, I, as a I was an alcoholic from the beginning, from the very beginning. I had to be drunk. I had to be sedated. I could never, ever just get tipsy or whatever other people did. I just, for me, it was, if I start, I'm skipping school. I mean, there's not going to be any school, and um, I'll just keep on going until I fall asleep at night. So I did make it to college, and same thing, except then people sort of were growing out of it, and I wasn't. I was, still the same, depressed. I didn't realize it at the time, but I had been suffering from major depression. I still had the anxiety, and I now know I had PTSD from the childhood stuff. And I just kept on going and got through that experience with lies and luck and, goodwill from, which I didn't deserve. I got a lot of passes, a lot of breaks, and made it through. Um, but again, I wasn't done, and everybody else seemed to be done. I just, this was still my coping mechanism. Um, at the time, I was, I ended up going into therapy, and at the time, I'll just go back a little bit, is, I was stuck at the emotional maturity of when I started drinking. So 15, and I never did learn how to relate to people because I was always trashed. So, and I had this much self-worth, the only self-worth I had was, okay, I can look good maybe, and I could be smart. That's it. Those are the two things I could hang my cap up for. And um, but that's not enough. It's not enough to get through life. And a lot of mistakes with boys, with men. The psychiatrist I was seeing abused me, just unable to take care of myself, basically, and to know what was a good situation, you know. Um, but I call this like the first miracle in my life, and it was further on. For some reason, I met my husband. I don't know how. I was, I still had major depression, PTSD, anxiety. I was an alcoholic, also doing drugs at the time. I did have a career, but I met this guy and he, in a dating app, and he saw me. He saw the person I was when I was 3.5. He saw the real me, and he took care of me, you know, saw me through therapy, hospitalization, saw me through, you know, get my bottom in a before I got to AA, my relapse, my drugs. And I just am so grateful for that. I'm grateful for him. I'm grateful for my higher power because I couldn't have done it. I could not have stayed alive because, I was at that point intent on dying. Um, but now I don't need to do that. Now, I'm still married, but I don't need it's amazing is now I think it's a that can do the carrying when I need to be carried, or my sponsor that can do the carrying when I need to be carried, or my higher power to carry me. But anyway, so I drank a long time, 32 years, did drank and drugs. um I got into AA. I always tell people by accident. I was with my husband at a conference in San Diego for him. And I was going to kill myself. I was going to either drown in the ocean or jump off a mountain. That was my plan. And, but I decided I needed a meeting and another fellowship because I didn't have a problem. I was going to go to an adult child meeting. And I walked into a place, a clubhouse, and it was an AA meeting. And they had a stage and a microphone, and they saw I was new and they called me to the stage. And I said, I'm not an alcoholic, but if you have any tips on how I can drink less tonight at my husband's dinner, I'd appreciate some suggestions. And I sat down, and all these ladies gave me little slips of paper with their phone number on it. And that was like the second miracle that I am aware of is I realized, the light bulb went off that AA is good. AA is not what I thought it was. I thought it was a place of shame. I thought I had this idea in my head that we just like people would, it was very judgmental. And I had no idea because I had never been. So, but I was wrong. I realized I was wrong, and that it's actually a good place with good people, and that I'm an alcoholic, and that all happened right there. And so came home after that trip and went to the place that became my home group then in Virginia, outside DC. Um, and I jumped into AA, did everything everybody said, steps, meetings, fellowship, but I still had a further bottom to go, because I am also a drug addict, and I realized, and 5 years later, I had to restart that part of the journey. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay because I never left the program. I just called up my sponsor the next day, and she said, go to a meeting, raise your hand, say, your name is Elena. I relapsed, and do that every meeting that you go to regularly for a week. And it was over. And I was ready. I was ready then to be, to do anything. because I realized how sick I was. Um, and again, same thing, do everything. Now, I know there are plenty of people that don't do everything and they're sober and happy and content. I I don't know which one for me I could give up. Like, could I give up service? Could I give up, so many meetings? But I just don't want to find out. I just am going to keep doing it. Plus, I like the people that do that. I realize that I see what I like, what I want to be when I grow up. And I've grown up a lot. Um, so I'm going to talk. I mean, I think that I've spoke 2 years ago and I went through the steps, but I think this time I want to talk about like my spiritual experience. Um, so when I came in, I was raised with a gods. I always had that inside me, but then I was the one who had faith and lost it because I was mad and disillusioned, and I haven't gone back to that one. It's not a good fit for me. But in when I started in AA, and I was on the second step with a sponsor, she asked me what to describe my higher power and to write down the characteristics. And I wrote down all these things from childhood, and they were huge words. And she said, I don't even know what those mean. Why don't you instead tell me what you need your higher power to be? And so I did that. And then I felt like, that's what this is about. I need my higher power to love me, to be with me all the time. So I'm never abandoned, never alone like that again. To give me strength and power when I'm scared, to give me guidance, to accept me and care about me, all that good stuff, and to be inside me because I need it when I'm not with you. And she said, okay, there you are. You can have that. And the rest of the journey for me, has been owning that, going back to that. What do I believe? I really do believe those things. So, but the third step, that's a different one I just didn't, I mean, I got the part about, you know, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to God as we understand him. I got the part about, doing my higher powers will instead of my will, like doing good things, staying sober, helping other people. I got all that, but maybe it was the turning my life over part that I didn't get. And that was okay because we kept on going through the steps and did the seventh step and the 11th step to the best of my ability and kept going. And I began sponsoring when I finished the steps and had a year, and learned a lot more. And I've always made a point of listening when people talk about their higher powers, or when the topic is, spirituality or second step, third step, 11th step, because this is where I learn. This is where I can grow, my higher power. And so one day a woman shared this, and I'm going to just read it because it blew me away. It's from the Daily Reflections, which there's a little bit that's from our literature, and then the rest is somebody's take on it. So it's not like this. that person's take isn't like AA, it's somebody's take on it. So, but I love it and I can relate. So she says, and I'm just giving her, I'm calling her she. Self-acceptance, November 11th. We know that God lovingly watches over us. We know that when we turn to him, all will be well with us here and hereafter. And that's the 12 and 12, page 105. And this is the part that I love. I pray for the willingness to remember that I am a child of God, a divine soul in human form, and that my most basic and urgent life task is to accept, know, love, and nurture myself. As I accept myself, I am accepting God's will. As I know and love myself, I am knowing and loving God. As I nurture myself, I am acting on God's guidance. And I pray for the willingness to let go of my arrogant self-criticism and to praise God by humbly accepting and caring for myself. And that just blew me away. My first part of me wants to say, oh, but that's so self-centered of me to think that, because I'm just thinking about me and not about you. And shouldn't my most basic instinct be to love and care for you? And, I know that's part of my higher power's will, but when I read this, I realized my higher power, Elena's higher power, I'm only speaking for me, really, really wants me to know, love, accept, and nurture myself first and foremost, because that's what I've always, always needed. That's what that little girl didn't get and what she needs and I still need that because I'm still, I tell people I'm the picture of mental health. I don't know if that's true anymore, but I am pretty stable. And but I still, that stuff from childhood doesn't go away. At least it hasn't for me. It's still in my body. I'm a very tense because I came about it honestly. I came about it because I was very young and had to deal with stuff that was too much for me. And so I need this. I need to know myself, love myself, nurture myself, and accept myself. And it's putting the oxygen mask on myself first. And that's been my experience that once I read this, and I think it was like 7 years ago, it changed everything for me with my higher power, because I just felt loved and I just felt like I knew what to do first. Second, I know what to do as well, which is, practice the principles in all my affairs. But first, this comes first. And so what that means for me is, for example, I've had this since early sobriety. I've had like sobriety routine. I love to drink in the afternoon, like late afternoon when I got off work. I loved to just turn that brain off, turn that body off. So I had a routine that I started, which is I just sit in front of the television and watch stupid television and drink iced tea and eat an apple. And I've done that ever since. And because it soothes me. And that is my job, to soothe me. who else would have that job? You know, it's nobody else's job and nobody else knows how to do it but me. Um, I'll even like if there's like we have guests visiting, I'll just disappear and go do that thing. I don't I honestly I used to care what they think, and now I'm like thinking, you really don't want me to skip this because it's going to go south from here if I don't do it. Um and it meant that, you know, when we moved, I had to really like speak up and say, this is where I need to move to. I need to move to Missoula. And I know it because when we checked out lots of things about Missoula, but I checked out AA. I went to Zoom here for a year and a half. And it had to be a place where I could call home and that would, where you know, I could help carry the message, but also I could be carried, you know, get fed. And I knew it was here and I stood up for myself there. Um, this year, you know, going back a little bit, but, you know, in AA, we say, let us love you until you can love yourself. And, you know, early, I went to women's meetings the first this is embarrassing 15 years of AA probably, and then also the 5 before, you know, when I relapsed. But they love me. And I saw that love in their eyes, you know, that the kind words, the cards where kind things would be said, you know, and I get that from my sponsor. I get those, you know, the way she looks at me. And I get that from all the women who have sponsored me and all the people here. And um and I get that from my higher power. And so this year I finally got, with all that love and acceptance and action. I mean, I'm doing it. I'm here. I got that text message Saturday morning saying, "Can you do this at the last minute?" And the answer has to be yes, unless there's a really good reason. Um, and there wasn't. um, I'd gotten the strength to go back and unpeel the layer and get some additional help, you know. And so I'm gonna, you know, I'm getting additional psychotherapy. I'm gonna see a therapist for my body to help me relax. And I'm, you know, finally getting all those doctor appointments that I was terrified of going to that just needed to be done. And I did it. And, you know, I do it because you are carrying me. You're giving me the strength to do it, you know. A funny moment happened I go to the 6:30 a.m. sunrise, and I shared with them that I had, you know, finished the last of the appointments and I hadn't walked out and I hadn't said no and I hadn't like, you know, said, this is my body and I'm not doing that. I didn't do any of that. They all applauded. And it was like, they knew, they get me that this was hard. I did it and I'm proud of myself. And I'm proud of myself for all this self-care. And that isn't selfish. It you know, AA is a selfless program, but it's also, it can be selfish when, I mean, the words that begin with self are not all bad, you know. It's okay to self-care. It's okay to I think to tell people what you've done and done well. That's, I mean, that's our third step prayer. and you can say it with me, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me, to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self so that I will better do thy will and take away my difficulties so that victory over them will bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And what I get from those last two sentences is, I'm asking my higher power to relieve me of, the things that make me not want to do this, make me the fear, self-centered fear that you're not going to like me or you're like, you're not going to want anything to do with me after this. Or, my pride, my vanity, all that stuff, my self-consciousness, all of that, so that I will better do thy will, which is this. What if this isn't, if an AA meeting isn't my higher power's will, I don't know what is. And then take away my difficulties so that victory over them will bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, thy way of life, that I have to share it. I feel that about my higher power, that I have to share it so that you will see that this works, bear witness that my higher power through me is able to do something. And boy, has my higher power done something. I mean, I was a messed up kid. I was a messed up teenager, a messed up adult, and I'm not anymore. I'm becoming who I was before, things got off track. I did the work, of course. I did all the inventory, the amends and all of that. But through it all, I get me back. I get me, and then I have a job to do, which is to share it and to do and to pass it on and to help another and all that stuff and show up even when I don't want to. Um, so let's see if I want to say any more. I guess I just want to say I really love AA. I mean, I've gotten I've done the medical stuff, and it's helped me. I'm not going to deny it. I have, mental health professionals who have helped me very much. But, AA is what saved my life because, what the drugs that I was doing mixed with the alcohol, it was close, I was very close. And then of course I had my own, I was planning on killing myself. So, but I don't do that. I don't feel that way anymore. That all has been relieved. And I have a reason to be here, and none of that would be here without AA. Like I'm not one of those who believes like everything happens for a reason, because then I get twisted, but I do believe that all the stuff, that came before AA and the pain and it's something it's my story, and it's something I can use to help somebody else, and that all of us have that. And I've seen that happen over and over again. So I'll just stop there. Thanks for letting me share.